pumpkins. Are you gonna be famous again today, huh? Oh my goodness, poppers. Welcome back. This is Sierra, and if you are new around here, which I'm not sure how many new people there are going to be today since this is a much awaited Q&A video, but if you are new around here, my name is Sierra and I'm an American who lives in Japan. Every week I try to make a new video about my family's life here and how we live a little bit more sustainably. So in this video today, as you guys can tell by the title, I'm doing a much awaited Q&A that I asked questions for months ago. And I'm really sorry I haven't had a chance to sit down and film this video until now because, as you guys know, we had to go to the United States for a little while this summer to get some paperwork and some family stuff straightened out, and then after that we came back to Japan, and then we were in lockdown, and then things got crazy. So anyway, now we are back to normal, kind of, and right now little man is in the other room napping, and don't really have anything to do right now, so I figured I would sit down and finally film this video for you guys. You guys asked a handful of questions. In my last video where I asked for questions, I said that you guys could ask us anything about our family or about our adoption or anything that you guys wanted to know, and you guys did not hold back, which is awesome. So I'm going to do this Q&A in like 3 little portions. I'm going to do the first questions general about our family, then I'm going to talk about the adoption questions that you guys asked, and then you guys asked a handful of questions about little man and vegan kids and stuff like that, so I'm going to leave those questions to the end. So first question that you guys asked me is, are you from Florida? No, short answer is I am not from Florida. The answer I think you guys probably want to know is where I am from, and some of you guys can't tell where I'm from because my accent is kind of a hot mess, and I'm aware of that because I've lived abroad multiple times. I originally grew up in Michigan, although I have lived in Europe, and also now I'm living in Asia. Second question is, why are you in Japan? I feel like I've alluded to it a few times, but the short version is that we are in Japan because of my husband's job, and in my husband's line of work, when he moves, the family moves. Moving on to the next question, number 3, why do you call your husband Mr.? There's a handful of reasons, but the original reason way back that I started calling him Mr. actually started at our wedding. At the end of an American wedding, they usually say, presenting for the first time, Mr. and Mrs. husband's name, and I don't know, jokingly, like right after our wedding, I was like, hey, come on, Mr., we got a reception to get to, and then it kind of stuck. But the other reason that we call him Mr. is because that's the social media name that he's chosen to use in my YouTube channel, because he doesn't want to use his legal name, and I want to respect his privacy. And so yeah, he's Mr. on my channel. Moving on to the next question is, oh, I think this question actually came from a makeup tutorial that I made for a friend of mine. I'll put it up in the cards if you guys can look at it. And that is, do you have a lot of makeup? Do you rotate your products? What techniques have you learned in Japan? Okay, first part of the question, no, I don't think so, not really. With my skincare routine, I try to be as minimalistic as possible just because I hate being one of those people who's accused of goo hoarding. So I just kind of keep it pretty simple with my makeup, but I have a little box that's like this big, and it has 3 little drawers in it, and it has my face makeup and my eye makeup and my lip products, and then next to that I have a few makeup palettes. Second half of the question is, do you rotate your products? I already answered that. No, not really. I mean, I have lipsticks and eyeshadow palettes that I tend to reach for more often in the summer or warmer months versus cooler months, but no, not really. Once I find something that works, I don't really see much reason to branch out. Okay, and what techniques have you learned in Japan? To be honest, I don't feel like I've learned a lot about makeup in Japan, but there's a couple things I've noticed that I think are really interesting about makeup in Japan. One thing, I don't know if you guys can see it, I'll zoom in when I edit this later, but when I do my makeup, I've noticed a lot of women in Japan don't really do like the winged eyeliner, and before I moved to Japan I really wasn't into the winged liner, but I was learning about it. But once I moved to Japan, I guess I kind of noticed that women don't do that very much in Japan unless they're going out on the town, so I kind of stopped doing the winged liner. But I wouldn't say it was because I wanted to blend in more, it's just something that I realized, like, I don't know, it uses a lot of product and I'm getting a little bit lazy. Other thing that I have not really learned, because I knew this before, but I was talking to a Japanese friend of mine about makeup, and I asked her like what kind of like Japanese makeup brushes I should use because I wanted to replace some of my brushes, and she told me that, to be honest, most Japanese women do their makeup either on the run or like in train station bathrooms, and so Japanese women and girls tend to use their fingers over brushes, or they might use a little thing that comes with the eyeshadow. So yeah, I think that was interesting. I have always been and probably will always be a brush kind of girl, but yeah, that's something I've learned in Japan about makeup. Okay, now moving on to the next section is the questions about adoption, and there's kind of a handful of questions. Some of these questions are about little man as well, but I'll guess these two sections are going to kind of run together. Anyway, first question about adoption is, how do you know if your adoption agency is licensed, and how do you know if the agency has finalized the adoption and that you are the legal parent of the child? The answer to that question varies depending on where you are adopting from and where you are adopting to, as in where you are living when you adopt, but I'll just share what we did to make sure that our organization was credible. This is actually a big concern for us because we have heard stories about adoption fraud and organizations like starting adoptions and then stealing people's money. What we did when we first contacted our agency is we had a initial Skype consultation with them, kind of like to ask them some questions about the organization while we were choosing, and we asked them first of all whether or not they've ever been accused of being like a scam and what they could provide us with to show their legitimacy. And we also asked if they had a list of people who we could contact to verify their experiences with their agency, and they did actually provide us with all of that. And the other thing that we asked for was a certified copy of their Hague accreditation. Other thing that you can do if you're interested in adopting from a certain country is there are a lot of various adoption groups on Facebook, and I think there's even a couple of rate your agency groups on Facebook or other forums on the internet, so you can check there and check out people's experience, because if someone has a good experience they'll usually say that, but if someone has a bad experience they will put it all out there. Next question is, how do you know if the agency has finalized the adoption and that you are the legal parent of the child? Again, this varies by country, but in China the way that it works, you actually finalize your adoption when you're in China. The first day you take custody of your child via a kind of like, I don't know what it's called, but it's almost like a emergency foster care type paper. I'm sorry, I don't know what it's called. And you keep your child overnight so you can observe to make sure the health condition of the child is as it said in the paperwork, and then the next day you actually go to the adoption registry office in your child's province and you finalize and register the adoption there. And then you have paperwork that says that this is your child and it's registered with China. And then within the entire process, you actually start paperwork to get your child's citizenship and visa to the United States before you leave the US. So all of that will be dealt with in China. So that leads actually really well into the next question. Question number 6, do you have to change your child's nationality from Chinese to American? And did you do this, or does your agency do this? Again, it depends. Our family's experience was a little bit different because we are expats living in Japan. However, the way that it typically works for a China adoption is that your child's citizenship paperwork gets started while you're in country. You have to go to the United States consulate in order to get your child's visa to enter the United States, and throughout that process you collect all of the documentation that's necessary for your child to become a US citizen. And after your consulate appointment, you leave for a day or two, and then you go back to the consulate to collect this brown packet. I actually don't know if we still have little man's packet. Within that packet, it has all the paperwork for your child's citizenship application, and if you fly from China directly back to the United States where you'll be living, then they go through the packet and your child gets their citizenship granted right at the airport. However, our situation was a little bit different. We had to redo the process through the N600K process, which we are going to make a video about the entire immigration process specifically for our son. So if there are any expat families who are watching this, please make sure to subscribe so you can watch that when it comes out. We are still working on getting a couple of things figured out on our end while we're in Japan, but as soon as all of that is finished, we are going to make that video, so stay tuned. Okay, yeah, sorry, the other half of the question I didn't answer was, do you have to change your child's citizenship from Chinese to American? I guess you technically don't have to change your child's citizenship from Chinese to American, but once your child enters the United States on the visa that you get when you leave with your adopted child from China to the States, they become stateless as soon as they enter the United States, so you would want them to have some type of citizenship. If that weren't the case, I guess theoretically you could keep their Chinese citizenship. However, they would have to have a long-term permanent residency visa in the US, and then if your family wants to travel internationally, you would have to get a visa for them every time you want to go somewhere, which could be pretty complicated. Next question is, why did you take little man back to the orphanage with you? I think that question was actually on my emotional orphanage visit video, and there are a handful of reasons why we decided to take little man back to the orphanage with us. First reason is that if we didn't take little man back to the orphanage when we went, we wouldn't have anything else to do with him, because obviously we didn't have a babysitter or anything in China, so I wasn't about to just like leave my kid in a hotel room. But the other reason we decided to visit his orphanage is because at the recommendation actually of a really good friend of mine who is an adoptee from Korea, and when she was adopted, her family was not able to visit her orphanage, and so when she got older and she asked questions, her family didn't have information or pictures of anything to show her about where she was raised for those first couple of years. And she said that if she were to go back in time and tell her parents one thing, it would be to get as much information as they could about where she was raised. So that's why we did it. And the last and final reason that we took little man back to the orphanage with us is because when little man was brought to us in our hotel, he didn't come with all of his nannies. He came with this really nice lady who worked at the orphanage, but she wasn't his primary caretaker, and so we wanted to have the opportunity to speak to his nannies and also his medical staff, so we could get a little bit more background about kind of who he is, what his habits are like, and also what kind of medical stuff has been done and how he reacted to things like that. And we wouldn't have been able to get that information without visiting the orphanage, because otherwise we'd have had to pay for all of the staff to come see us in the capital, and that just was not going to happen. So yeah, that's why. It was a difficult experience for little man, and you guys saw in the first part of the video. So yeah, that's why. I know that a lot of people who are watching may disagree with our decision, but it was almost a year ago and we can't go back and change it now. So yeah, sorry if that makes you really upset. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. Okay, now it's kind of moving into the questions about little man, so I'm going to call this the little man section in the timestamps. That question is, does little man talk? Is little man bilaterally deaf? Does he get speech therapy? Do you know sign language for your match with him? And will you make a sign language vlog? Okay, let's take this in pieces. Yes, little man can talk. He talks every day. He is still working on acquiring language in English and both American Sign Language, but yes, he is able to express himself, and he learns more vocabulary and speaks better sentences every day. He does receive speech therapy at the local elementary school a couple of times a week. Next is going on to, did you know sign language were your match with him? Okay, short answer to that question is kind of. I had a friend in the States who was hard of hearing, so I learned a handful of signs from her back in the day, and also even further back, like 15 years earlier, I learned a lot of signs through Scouts. But once little man's paperwork came back and we found out that he was deaf, we did what any parent of a deaf child would do. We started learning sign language, and we're not, I wouldn't say we are fluent in sign language, but we are getting pretty good. And last question is, will you make a sign language vlog? I don't know if my signing is good enough or if I'm comfortable making a vlog all in sign language, but maybe someday. I don't know. Stay tuned. Maybe. I don't know. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Does little man have a name? If so, what is it? Yes, little man does have a name, but we have decided as a family that we are not going to share his legal name on the internet for a handful of reasons, most of them being to keep him safer, because there's creepy people out there. And again, kind of like Mr's name, we want to give him the choice about whether or not he wants his legal name attached to the content that we've published on YouTube and elsewhere. Okay, next question. When are you going to cut little man's hair? He'll go blind if you don't. I don't think he's gonna go blind if we don't cut his hair, and actually little man has had 3 haircuts since he's been home. However, I think by haircut you mean when are we gonna buzz his head, and the answer to that question is we don't know, maybe never. It's his hair, and right now he doesn't really have an opinion on how his hair is done and styled, and I personally like long hair on boys, so until further notice he'll have slightly longer hair, but once he gets older, if he has to cut it, then we'll cut it. It's just hair. Next question that you guys asked is, it says, it's great to see him getting along with his cousin. How come his cousins are Asian? Okay, I think that question is in relation to my either Detroit Farmers Market video or my ice cream truck video. I'll put both those up in the cards for you guys to check out if you want to. In the video, you see video footage of little man playing with Asian kids. Those children in the video are actually one of our friend from university's kids. Mr. and I have been really close friends with this couple for a long time. I'm gonna say like probably 13 years or so. And the reason that we call them cousins is because the couple in the video are actually little man's godparents, meaning what that means is if something happens to Mr. and I, that they'll be the ones who take care of our children. And so I guess technically they're his god sisters, but I don't actually think that that's a word, so we just call them cousins, and little man calls each of them uncle and auntie. So yeah, that's why they're called his cousins. Moving on to the next question is, how did little man sleep after you got home from China? What about after your time in the US? That's a really good question, and one thing to note about the first half of the question is because our family lives in Japan, there really wasn't that much of a time change. I think it's only an hour between China and Japan, so as far as the time difference, it didn't really bother him that much. As far as coming back to Japan from the US and going the other way, he slept pretty good because I think he was just exhausted. Even though the time difference was weird, he was up for almost 24 hours each way, and he was just ready for bed. Okay, moving on to the last few questions. It looks like the last 3 questions that you guys asked are regarding veganism in our family. So before I get into that, I do want to throw out the disclaimer that I am not giving any medical advice, and this is just my opinion. So if you have questions about vegan kids, please don't take everything that I say in this video as gospel. Please take it with a grain or spoonful of salt, and reach out to a professional if you have any deep questions about raising vegan kids. The first question is, why is little man vegan? Short version of that is little man is vegan because we are. Just like how a lot of Omni parents raise their children as Omnis. So why would we give our children a different diet if that's not our diet? Same thing like goes for if you are living in the Middle East, why would you give your child an American diet? That's not your diet, that's not your lifestyle. That being said, the next question that comes up is veganism safe for children? Does it affect growth? So I'm going to put a study in the description box if you guys want to check it out. To give you guys the Reader's Digest version, the official stance on that is that vegetarian diets are safe and healthy if they are well planned for all life stages. And that's all I'm going to say. I have a handful of friends who are raising vegan kids, and our pediatrician is on board with raising our son vegan, and so is our dietitian. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. If you have any more questions, you guys can put them in the description, but again, I can't give you advice. This will just be my opinion to the questions that you guys are asking. Okay, and the next question is, did little man ask for non-vegan food when he came home? Without sharing too much information about him, little man does have some animal protein allergies, so he didn't really ask for non-vegan food. However, at home, once in a while, we do have like faux meat products in our house, and he doesn't really necessarily understand the difference between the vegan food and the non-vegan food. So for example, once in a while when we go to a place called Coco's Curry, which I know we eat a lot because it's delicious, they have like pork katsu on the menu, but they also have the soy-based vegan katsu on the menu, and he doesn't really understand the difference between the two. To him, it's all food, and once he is old enough to understand the implications of like the health implications and the animal rights implications and the environmental factors behind meat, he can make that choice. But until then, little man be raised vegan. So yeah, that's as much as I'm going to say about that. And the last question that you guys asked, which is interesting: if you are vegan, do you take medicines? Don't you know some of those are tested on animals? So that question is a difficult question to answer, and every vegan will probably have a different answer. Personally, for me, it really kind of depends on what it is. If it's something simple like a headache or like muscle aches or something, I'm more likely to try something that's natural. For example, like if I have a headache, I usually diffuse peppermint oil in the house to kind of like help like relax those muscles, or I'll roll some peppermint oil on myself and like inhale it. But when it comes to something that's a little bit more severe, like for example, let's say one of us has an infection and we have to decide between possibly dying from that infection or taking the antibiotics that are tested on animals, it's a situation where it's not a perfect world, but you have to decide individually what's best for you. In our family, if it comes between dying of a bacterial infection and taking an antibiotic that was tested on animals, we're going to take the antibiotic. But again, that gets into a tricky situation where it's a survival situation, and so I feel like things are a little bit different But I'm probably going to get some backlash from the vegan community about that. But yeah, that's what our family would do. So anyway, that is the end of the 15 questions I pulled from your many questions for this Q&A. If you guys have any other questions you would like to ask us, maybe we'll do a part 2 to this. You can leave those in the description box. And if you guys liked what you saw today and you've watched all the way to this point, you must have liked this video. So please make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys very soon. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.